This is Justin.
And this is Haley. You're listening to The Price of Avocado Toast.
We're a married millennial couple wanting to normalize the conversations around money. We want to hear about your highs and your lows,
The do's and the don'ts on your path towards financial freedom. Hi, Toasties. Welcome to The Price of Avocado Toast.
Whether you're a first-time listener or you've been following us from the start of this thing, we are so glad to have this conversation with you today.
All right, we're doing things a little bit differently. We spoke about this last week, but we're going to format things differently and start talking to people. Like we say in the intro, we want to hear your highs, your lows. We want to hear real people talking about money. And we want to normalize this conversation about money with normal people, no matter where you are in your journey. So, Mimi from Meadow Sweet Money reached out to us on Instagram, and she's the first person we're talking to, and she's legit. I'm so excited to talk to her. Well, we already talked to her, so I'm excited for you guys to hear us talking to her.
Yeah, absolutely. She was great.
So, enjoy.
Alrighty, well, you guys, we are sitting down today with Mimi from Meadow Sweet Money. And Mimi, this is exciting for us because you're the first person that, while maybe not totally in the pro financial field, you're the first person we got to sit down with and actually talk to a normal human being about money and their relationship with money. So thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been really enjoying listening to your podcast and hearing some other people who, again, are not professionals, but just enthusiasts about personal finance. So that's really exciting to talk to you guys.
Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, it's great. And, I love hearing all the stories about being parents and your own journey and what you guys are doing. So it's been thrilling to connect with you guys in my own head, but now I get to connect to you one-on-one, and that's awesome.
Definitely. So you obviously reached out to Haley via Instagram and were like, hey, I'm totally cool with coming on.
Yeah.
Haley gets to run the Instagram account, so I don't get to interact with it too much. But this morning, she's like, hey, you need to look at Mimi's account beforehand to check out some stuff. So explain what all of it is about, because you're not like a pro in the financial field, but there's exciting things on your Instagram page and what you're doing. So kind of tell the listeners what it is that Meadow Sweet Money is all about, or your Instagram is all about.
Sure. So my Instagram had actually originally started as a way for me to talk about my love of vintage and retro fashion. So you can see that in my Instagram account. I really love doing my hair in 1940s and 50s style. I have a traditional 1940s haircut called a midi, M-I-D-D-Y. And I can only trust one girl to cut my hair, and she's amazing. So it really started as a way to express that side of myself. And then when I started my debt-free journey, I realized how much I cared about talking about personal finance, and that anybody can manage their own money. They don't have to be a professional. There's lots of great resources out there. So I wanted to share my voice. And so my original Instagram handle was Miss Meadow Sweet, and I evolved it to incorporate the money side of it. So that's where I got the Meadow Sweet Money.
I like it. So I have to say, I'm currently in a production for It's a Wonderful Life, the radio play. And when Haley showed me your Instagram this morning, and I'm seeing all this vintage stuff in the hair and everything, and I'm like, oh, I feel like this is like a character from Bedford Falls that's there in the town. It was very topical for you to be our first guest. So
thank you. Well, and it's that's a high compliment to say that I could be somebody out of that movie. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So Mimi, you are coming from Florida, right?
Correct. So I live on the west coast of Florida, kind of in the middle, about an hour south from Tampa, in a really amazing town called Sarasota. And I love it here. I did not always love it here. I definitely was one of those teenagers that was like, get me out. And then I fell in love with the place. So my husband and I met in high school in Sarasota. I went to college in Sarasota and decided I didn't ever want to leave. So people spend a lot of money to come here on vacation, and they spend a lot of money to retire here. So why would I want to go anywhere else?
Yeah, that makes sense. If it's a destination for others, then maybe it's a cool place or
It
a good
is.
spot to be, for
It's
sure.
an awesome place.
Yeah. So on your Instagram, you list, how much debt you started with, and it now says that you're debt free. Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And actually, that number was smaller when I very first started. When I, back in like February of 2019, I realized something was definitely wrong. And I opened my bank account and I was terrified to look at my accounts, just absolutely terrified. So I looked at my bank accounts and I realized I had a credit card that was nearly maxed out. And I only had one, but I had a nearly maxed out credit card. And I also had recently gotten a new car loan. It was a new to me car. It was, very exciting. And it was something I definitely at that point in time needed, because it was either have a car or walk in, and that was walking was not an option with my work situation. But I was looking at that situation going, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And it was a little over $16,000 of debt that I had. So I went, okay. And thankfully, I found an amazing book by Vicki Robin, which many people have heard, and some have read it, some have not. But her book, Your Money or Your Life, was the complete game changer.
Ooh.
So I listened to it driving to and from work, and everything that I believed about money started to change from that point after listening to her book.
Oh, that's awesome. We haven't heard of that book, so you
No.
just gave us, yeah. I'm like, I want to go look
Yeah.
it up right now.
That kind of sounds like what happened when we listened to the Dave Ramsey The Total Money Makeover book. It was like we were sitting in a car going, I think we were driving to my dad's or something, on a road trip, and I was like, hey, let's listen to this book. And we're like, oh my God, everything we've been doing is so wrong. Everything we thought was wrong. What are we doing?
Right. And then you look around and you go, wait a minute, this isn't sustainable. Like, it wasn't something. And again, I had heard of a little bit of Dave Ramsey. He was not clicking, his message wasn't clicking for me initially, but listening to Vicki Robin, she put it into a perspective that made so much sense for me and my life. I was familiar with a little bit with the baby steps that Dave Ramsey has, and major kudos to him. He's done so much for so many people, but it didn't work for my situation. I had two debts, and doing either the debt snowball or the debt avalanche wouldn't have mattered, because they were about the same amount of money, and they were roughly the same interest rates. So I just kind of went, okay, I got to attack these both a little bit simultaneously. So I came up with a strategy based on what I felt was right for my situation, and definitely had a lot of setbacks. But the biggest thing for me was looking at my spending behavior and seeing that I was having a lot of spending habits that weren't serving me and weren't making me happy. And I just had to figure out how to break the habit. And that's a lot harder than it sounds like. Breaking money habits are really hard sometimes.
Yeah, we've definitely lived lived through that, because I agree that is one of the harder parts of it. It's, I don't want to say easy, but you can make it competitive and like get excited about doing something, but if you don't change like the background noise of all of it, then you're basically just continuing that cycle.
Exactly. And I had actually, when I really began my debt free journey, the biggest thing for me was eating out at lunch almost every single day. And I realized that, one, it wasn't making me happy. I do enjoy eating out, and that is a category in my budget that I do account for now, but it wasn't making me happy. And ultimately, there were many times that I would leave feeling unfulfilled from eating out. So even though I was spending time with my colleagues, even though I was enjoying that aspect of it, I wasn't satisfied with the experience of going out to eat for lunch. And the way that I broke that habit was actually quite interesting. I set a challenge for myself to bring lunch every day. And at first that did not work because I would forget. I'd get all the way to work and I'd go, oh my gosh, my lunchbox is still in the fridge at home. What am I going to do? And so what I did is I actually would buy I'd say, okay, Sunday, I'm going to buy my 5 frozen meals and, try to find some coupons, but I'd buy my 5 frozen meals. And as long as Monday morning I took those into work and stuck them in the freezer, I was set for the rest of the week. So I'd go in, and I made a challenge for myself to rate the frozen lunches using gifts from the Schitt's Creek show. And so there was some really great, reviews that I would post on my Instagram about, oh my gosh, this was so terrible, or the only, good part of this meal was the cheese, or it didn't have enough sauce, or what. But what it ultimately did was, one, it gave me choices. So I don't know about anybody else, but you might bring lunch to work and pull your lunch out and you're like, oh man, this is so not what I want. So it gave me variety, which was really, really important and part of why eating out is fun. It also gave me a challenge because I had something to do with my lunch. It wasn't just, okay, I'm eating lunch, here at work, but I now also have to rate and review it because other people are like, where's the latest lunch, that you're going to share? And then it also got me out of the pattern of going out to eat and started breaking that. And when you do it for a whole month, it really made it easier for me to start bringing my lunch on a regular basis. So I took down as many barriers as possible because I know for myself, I don't make good decisions when I'm hungry. I don't make good decisions when I'm tired, and I don't make good decisions when I have low willpower. And that all those things were causing me to continue the habit of eating out. So when I could lower the barrier of entry to making it as easy as possible to bring lunch, I could break that habit and spend less money. And that was huge. I think making things a challenge for yourself and making it fun. I love Sarah Von Bargen from Yes and Yes talks about the habit change of kind of like in the movie Indiana Jones, where he's like trying to trade out from the totem to the bag of sand. Like you have to do that for yourself mentally. So that's really, that was the biggest game changer for me.
That's awesome. It seems like your Instagram really aligns to that idea too. You have a lot of bits and moments on there that talk about setting up small wins for yourself. Setting the right habits doesn't have to be this massive overhaul immediately because you give yourself a higher propensity to fail.
Yeah. And we as a society and as a culture, failure is the worst thing you can do. But actually, that's how we learn, is we have to fail and fail often, but fail forward. So I like setting up ways for myself to make it fun in failing. And that the more I can recognize and applaud people for, hey, if you've set a goal for yourself that you're not going to spend for 7 days and you only, meet that goal to 5 days, hey, I'm going to be on the sidelines cheering for you saying, this is the best thing ever. How great, because you still had 5 no spend days. That's incredible, especially if you are used to spending every single day. So we have to get better about applauding those small wins.
Agreed. That's
And
awesome.
I love that you took the challenge of eating out every day and taking that head on, because I feel like everyone I talk to, their biggest challenge is either how much they eat out or controlling their grocery budget. Whatever it is, it has something to do with food, and we love food. I love eating out. I love getting food from different places. I love the social aspect, and we still ate out. We ate out last night, and now that we don't do it every day, I don't think we ever did it every day, but now that we don't do it all the time, it's so much more enjoyable. So when you go out to eat now, do you feel like you appreciate it more?
I appreciate it more, and I'm also more intentional about where I go out to eat.
Same.
So I don't mind going to a place that's a little bit more expensive if I know the experience is going to bring me more joy and more happiness, and have more memories around that experience. So, for instance, I lump in anytime I eat out at Disney, that is lumped into my Disney expenses category because I want to know how much I spend with that one company. And I don't mind spending a little bit more to eat there and have a really great experience and be with friends that I love very much. But if I'm going to go out and just get like a slice of pizza because I'm hangry and I didn't plan well, like that's not going to make me happy. It's less money to eat the pizza, sure. But at the end of the day, that's going to be a regrettable and forgettable expense. Whereas eating something at Disney or eating at a friend's birthday that's maybe a little bit more expensive, that's something I'm going to cherish and treasure. So I try to budget for the things that are more memorable.
Regrettable and forgettable. I'm going to write that down like in the car.
Yes.
So when we go somewhere, I'm going to think, am I going to cherish and remember this experience and really enjoy every bite? Or is it just going to be something I forget about tomorrow and I have a stomach ache?
Yeah.
There you go.
And the biggest difference, I think, between regrettable and forgettable, like regrettable expenses are things that you purchase and you maybe thought a bit about it, but you buy it and you go, oh man, this really wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Great example is I have bought a lot of beauty products. I have bought a lot of hair care products. I have bought a lot of things that I buy it and I go, oh man, this is terrible. I don't like this at all. I wish I had gotten a sample size or something. Whereas forgettable is that stuff that when you go through the dollar spot at Target or something and you buy something and you throw it in your cart and you look at the receipt like a week later going, what the heck did I buy? You don't even remember. So those two things I really try to cut back on as the regrettable and the forgettable expenses.
For sure. Yeah, looking at the receipt and being like, what was this item again? Oh my God. That's all too common in our household. So
Yes.
I've got a question, Mimi, and if you're uncomfortable sharing, I'll cut this part out of the podcast. But I just want to know, you've mentioned multiple times like that you put food into your budget.
I do.
And so if you're comfortable sharing, what do you guys put as your food budget line item? And why do you think that others should be budgeting that in as well?
So I actually have food in a couple of different categories. And I know that sounds really weird, but it works well for me. I actually am a big believer that your budget category should match your lifestyle and your personality, and that what works for me is not going to work for someone else. And my husband and I do actually keep our finances separate. He has a business and it gets really complicated with our finances. So we sort of share responsibility in buying groceries and we take turns. So he'll buy groceries one week, I buy groceries the next week. And the way that he plans for groceries is very different than the way I plan for groceries. And that's okay. But I also have an eating out budget, and the way that I budget is by looking at past spending and then also through looking at my calendar. So I never, ever, ever create a budget without one, updating my calendar, and two, looking at my spending tracker. So those are the two things that work well for me, and it fluctuates. So with the pandemic right now, I'm certainly not eating out anywhere near as much as I was. Even when I was still paying off debt, I kept that line item very small, but I would put in things that, for instance, I knew I was working 3 jobs. So I own a business, I had a day job, and then I had a side hustle while I was paying off debt. And I'd look at my calendar and I go, okay, there is no way that I'm going to have time to stop in between my day job and the side hustle. I need to account for some kind of eating out. So stop by the coffee shop and I would get something, but I'd also bring another little snack for myself later. And that's how I'd keep that line item low. But I think we tend to budget and restrict ourselves so much that we don't account for the things that really are expected because we don't always look at our calendar first. So if you can kind of look at your calendar and think through the rhythm of a day, you can plan out your budgets a little bit easier. So for me, I might have the grocery store a budget anywhere between $20 to $100, depending on what we already have in our pantry and what my husband bought the week before. So it works for us and it makes sense for us. But I do know that my budget is not set in stone. So if I budget for $100 and my husband comes back with a carload of Costco groceries the previous week, hey, I can cut way back and that's okay. So we keep it flexible, but I also understand like my top priority when I budget is my saving and investing. And now that I'm debt free, I don't have to worry about that aspect anymore either.
I think where we failed when we first started budgeting was that we would look at the calendar, but I don't think we necessarily put things in as specifically as we should have. So, for example, if I have lunch with a friend this Saturday planned, I have a birthday in 2 weeks planned, we have Thanksgiving coming up, those would be things that would take a huge hit on either groceries or eating out. And so you have to really account for, okay, how much am I going to spend here? Let's just estimate this and then put it into the budget. And we didn't do that at first, but it's gotten better with time for sure.
Yeah. And I found for myself something I do when friends invite me out is I do look at menus online so that I can get a better estimate of how much something's going to cost. So, we have a really great place here locally that my friends and I like to go to. It is on the pricier side, but I can look at the menu and go, oh, I know I can eat this item on their menu and it's not that expensive. And oh, if I only have one glass of wine instead of 2 glasses of wine, that'll save me some extra money. So I try to always look at things and get a little bit more information and data before I make a plan.
Mm-hmm. I like that. It's so important when you're budgeting too to be as specific as possible. We really failed at that until our coach was like, "Hey, flush this out a little bit more because miscellaneous just can't be this much, guys."
Yeah, and it's okay to have a miscellaneous category. Some things just don't fit into your typical budget categories on a regular basis. But if I found that there were times that, especially when I first started, I'd have things in my miscellaneous category show up a few times, and I'm like, oh, that could be its own category. So my budget is actually very much guided by my spending tracker, and I maintain my spending tracker. I try at least once or twice a week to go in and plug in things that I've spent money on. For instance, I recently had a dentist appointment that cost a little bit extra because we thought we were only going to do a crown, and no, we got in there and said, oh, we also need to do a root canal. So sometimes you have to be a little bit flexible with where things are in your budget, and that's okay.
Yeah. What budget tracker app do you use, or have you created your own spreadsheet? What do you like to go with?
Yeah, so I found this really fabulous thing. It's like Canva and Excel had a baby, and it's amazing. It's called Airtable.
Oh.
And I created a little video on how I set mine up, but I created this spending tracker that really helps me to look at, I can sort it by month, but I can also sort by spending category. I can sort it, I can look at how much I've saved in certain category areas. It's interesting. When I was in my debt-free journey, I was really struggling to keep my emergency fund fully funded. So in October of last year, I actually had to have surgery. And it completely drained my emergency fund. I didn't realize that I was going to have surgery, but when I went and saw the doctor, they were like, oh yeah, it's this other thing, not the thing you thought you had. So you're going to have this outpatient procedure. And that just drained my emergency fund. And so even though I kept trying to build it back up, I didn't quite get it built back up until pretty recently. So now I'm going to have about 3 months of emergency fund by the end of this year, and I'm so excited. But yeah, things change for sure.
That's awesome. Congrats. That rocks.
Hey.
So, you've listened to our podcast. I'm sure you've heard many of our stupid money mistakes that we've made. What would you say is the biggest money mistake that you've made? Like, if you could go back and be like, Mimi, don't do it, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. So I found out that I had $11,000 in a retirement account that I did not know I had. I had left a job, and 2 years later, it was a very toxic job. It made me very unhappy. And 2 years later, I get this letter saying, "Hey, we've been trying to reach out to you. Obviously, your email address has changed. We need your contact information for this 401k." And I was like, "I don't have a 401k." And for 2 years, I had been angry that I got kind of like screwed over by this old job and upset. And I called and verified it was a legit company. And the woman told me, "Oh yeah, not only do you have this 401k, there's $11,000 in it." And I was so mad at myself because I wasn't paying close attention to what different things were in my financial life before. And that, I think, is my biggest money mistake, is that I was afraid to talk about money. I was afraid to learn about money. And I was very afraid to keep track of what was going on with my life financially. So I think for me, the biggest money mistake was just being ignorant to things. And once I found out about that, I was like, oh man, these are invested in the totally wrong things. Look at all the fees. This is ridiculous. Thankfully, I was able to put it into a rollover IRA account through Vanguard and get it into things that are actually, going to make me some money
Yeah.
towards my retirement. But yeah, not paying attention has always been my biggest money mistake.
I feel like we don't know what we're getting into. You start a job, or when you're first like getting really started in a career, there's match programs and whatever. You have all these things, but there's a serious lack, from my experience, of explanation of what the hell everything is. What are you signing up for? What does it mean? How does it impact your future?
Mhm.
It's just, okay, cool. I hear that's for retirement. I don't really care because I'm 22. And then you forget about it. And then
Right.
it's,
Yeah, and they'll refer you to, somebody who calls himself a professional. And yeah, okay, somebody who's a financial advisor, that term can be used for a lot of things. And I did not realize that I had gotten pushed into an appointment with somebody who called themselves a financial advisor, but they were really an insurance salesman more than anything else. So I was paying like $30 a month for disability insurance that I really did not need. There was some other things. And so I got rid of that, thankfully, once I listened to Vicky's book and I got my head on straight about money and started following a lot of people in the debt-free community. I was like, wait a minute, this is ridiculous. I don't need this. And then realizing that there were other ways that I could invest for my future that I could control, and that I don't need to be a professional. I don't need to have all the knowledge. I just need to have a basic understanding of how the system works, and then understand my comfort level.
Yeah. Comfort level. Gosh.
did you become debt free this past July?
I did.
That's
I
so
did. So
fun.
July 31st, and this year, so in the midst of a pandemic and everything else, I became debt free. And I had side hustled through, it was really like January till about mid March, right before everything shut down. I was supposed to work a few more shows. I was working side hustling at our local opera house, working backstage, and they had to shut everything down, which was really tragic. But that job actually made it possible for me to pay off my credit card. And then I got a new job that paid a little bit more, negotiated my salary for the first time in my entire life.
Nice.
Yeah, and so I was able to do that in June, and then paid off my car. Let's see, my car was supposed to be paid off October of 2022, and I paid
Wow.
it off July of this year.
That's awesome. So I know we're in a pandemic and everything's kind of funky, but what does your life look like now with work? Do you have two jobs and no side hustle, or how are you doing that?
So, because I'm a crazy person, I do have my business that I do with my best friend. I'm also very quietly in the background building another side business that is a area of passion of mine. Obviously, it's going to be related to money in a certain way. And then I have my day job, and I am really leaning into the idea of, I do my 9 to 5, and then my, 5 to 9 is what's building my future.
What do you think is the best part about living debt-free now that you've been debt-free for the last few months?
Being debt free has meant that I can breathe a little bit easier. I don't there's this weight off of my shoulders that I didn't even really totally understand was there. And budgeting is so much more fun now. It is so much more fun. And because I have a lot more wiggle room, and like going to the dentist, being able to see a therapist, being able to put more money away, being able to have some more spontaneity, all of those things have been welcomed into my life because of debt freedom.
I love that. I can't wait to just have that. It's freedom. It really is
It really is
a
freedom.
weight
It's
off of your
freedom.
shoulders.
Yeah, and I didn't realize too how nice it is to know, like, okay, if I lost my job, I would be totally okay. Or if I'd suddenly decided to go all in on my two businesses, it would be totally okay. And debt freedom just opens doors that you didn't even know were there.
I have recently kind of been experiencing something like that. I have a temporary position. I'm a substitute teacher right now, but it's a long-term substitute, and it happens to be
Oh, I
with,
was a long-term sub for a hot minute there. I
yeah, it
understand.
happens to be with a really great district, so I'm getting paid like on the teacher salary schedule, but I'm not getting all of the deductions, so I'm actually
Right.
making significantly more money than I did when I was, paying into everything else that they made you pay into. But I would do this like forever. if if it didn't mean that I was losing out on my years of service and all of that, blah blah
Right,
blah.
right.
But then again, I keep thinking freedom, debt once we're at that place where we have total freedom and we can make the choice, I would have been investing in my own retirement anyway, so it really wouldn't matter. I wouldn't need the retirement from my job. So, it gives you so many possible avenues of what you want to do with your life, and you have the choice to choose instead of just having to do X, Y, and Z because society tells you that that's what you have to do.
Well, and debt freedom also made me realize I don't need as much money to live on as I think I do. I went through a period of time where I was like, okay, based on the 4% rule, which is the idea of how much money you would need to have in retirement to draw down every year, about 4%, and never run out of money, right? So the whole idea of being able to live completely self-sustained on your investments, awesome. So that's, something I'm definitely working towards. But I kept having in my head that I needed to have, $60,000 a year. I've never made $60,000 a year ever. And I was like, where did this number come from? And I realized it was completely this arbitrary number. I actually went on the Social Security website and I logged in to my little profile and I saw my income report and I was like, holy moly, I really don't need as much money as I think I do to function and live and have a great life. And I think that's part of the whole idea of we're constantly striving to spend as though we have the kind of lifestyle and the kind of income that we believe we should have, when we can actually live a great life on a whole lot less.
Words of wisdom for people's soul right
Yeah,
there.
for real.
Coming into the holiday season, like, hey, be thankful for what you got.
And you don't
Yeah.
have to do, I don't know. You don't have to have a job that you hate. Like, you don't have to do things that you
No.
don't want to do. But when you
Right.
don't, like, when you don't have the choice, when you're drowning in debt, that's when you have to do all these things that totally suck. So freedom means that you can literally choose to do whatever you want. You can have the job that fuels your soul. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, you're free. Mimi, why do you think people have this taboo feeling when it comes to talking around money? Why do you think that it's like that? Because, I mean, we were certainly like that. And it's not until recently to where we were like, okay, let's put it all out on the table. But it's really easy, I think, to put up the walls and protect yourself. So why do you think people do that? Why do you think that is in our culture?
I think part of it is this idea that, it's kind of like I only recently learned that the whole idea of voting being this like private, secret thing is a very new concept, right? So we think that things have been a certain way for a long time when they really haven't. And I think our culture has always been a, focused on, who you are as an individual, and everything is about us as individual people, as a cult, at least in the American culture. And I think it really shows when over time, like my parents didn't really talk about money, at least not openly about specific numbers or figures or how things worked, but they did talk about money in a very nuanced way. So I remember my mom would say things, oh, money's just like sand in your hand. The minute you get it, it falls right out. Or there would be little phrases and things that would be said about money that stuck in my mind, but you have to think about it. My therapist gave a great example. Like when you walk through an airport, they tell you don't pick up any bags that are not yours, right? But that's what we're doing in life is we're picking up all these ideas from other people and we're stuffing them into our own luggage, and then we wonder why our back hurts, right? So if we can start shedding some of these ideas and concepts that don't really belong to us, that don't really serve us, especially money mindsets, that's a complete game changer. And then you don't have to pay overage fees when you get to the gate.
Mimi, I love you. I'm so glad you reached out to us. You are legit.
Thank you. Oh, that's so sweet. I love talking to you guys too. It's been so fun.
I'm stealing that one. I'm
Yeah,
gonna be like, hey,
I'm
you
like,
know what?
this is
That's not my luggage, man. I'm not carrying that.
shed it.
Yeah.
Get rid of
I
it.
can't carry that.
So now, do you speak to your family and friends about money?
I do sometimes to the point that it's annoying and I have
Same.
right? And so sometimes I have to gauge people. I am better about gauging people when they're like starting, I can see their eyes glaze over and they're just like, oh my God, I can't. But what has helped me talk about it is entry points that they can connect with. So talking about, hey, I'm doing a no spend challenge because I kind of want to see where some of my spending triggers are. Or, hey, I'm doing this weird thing with lunch. Do you want to join me? Like, I'm going to sit and have my lunch. If you want to go get something and come back, that's fine. But like, let's eat lunch together. And then telling them about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So I try to talk to people about money at an entry point that makes sense for them if they seem open to it. Um, and I find what is most interesting is I get a lot of messages on my Instagram account, people asking questions about how do I handle this, or how has this worked out for me? Um, and I'm a big believer, you got to make your journey yours. So what's going to work for me may not necessarily work for you, but I can at least share my wisdom and my failures along the way, and you might be able to learn something from it.
Mm-hmm. Do you find yourself interested in like coaching in the future or anything like that?
Oh, I would love to do some coaching in the future. I think there's lots of opportunity, especially I see a huge need for that almost college aged young people. And then really, and I know you feel this for sure because you work in education, like teachers and nonprofit people and folks who are dedicated and they clearly have big hearts for what they do, but nobody's talking to them about these things. And how do you live a life on that's quality on a teacher salary? Or how do you live a quality life and do things that make you happy when you're working for a nonprofit and trying to save the world? Because nonprofits do not pay well at
No.
all.
There's a podcast that I really like, and it's an Instagram account that we connected with, one of the first ones as well, and it's the Budget Teacher podcast. And they are a couple teachers in the Midwest who speak on it, but I agree that like the nonprofit slant, there's definitely a need, and I think we see that so unfortunately right now with the pandemic shutdown and like local theater. And when I went to our first read through the other night, we're socially distanced and stuff, and our artistic director is making a good point of us wearing masks and stuff, but he's talking about making jokes. He says, our theater was ahead of the times because we already practiced social distancing without getting people in the doors. And it's sad, but it's true. Like it's this, we're losing art, and along with that comes the financial instability of the human beings that work in those spaces to create that for others. And it's just unfortunate. I love Netflix and I love Hulu and stuff, but there's no experience like going to a theater and for an hour and a half or 2 hours, suspending whatever world you're from and being able to be there. And we're losing it. And along with that comes the financial instability for those humans, and that hurts. So it'd be great if there was something along those lines where it was, could help people in those lanes. That'd be great.
Yeah, and it's not just the people who are performing or you're looking at admin staff, you're looking at support team, you're looking at, the folks who are selling the tickets, you're looking at every aspect of the nonprofit, especially arts world, has been impacted by this pandemic, and it's really sad and scary to me that we're losing so many, and especially the smaller organizations who, they're already working on razor thin margins. And I worry about that for sure. And thankfully, the community I live in, there are a lot of people with big hearts and who are willing to open their wallets and do good things. But I think they're getting tapped out as well. It's starting to get to a place where people are going, yeah, I just can't extend any more than I already have. So we're at risk of losing some great organizations from just, the longevity of this pandemic.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
I have one very important question for you. Are you ready for this?
I'll do my best.
It's really not that big. But
Okay, good.
now that you've been through it, now that you've been there, done it, you paid off your debt, you paid your dues, what would you say is like the biggest piece of advice you'd give to someone who is working their way through it right now, or someone who doesn't even know where to start?
Oh my gosh. So for people who do not know where to start, just start. Just start somewhere. It doesn't matter. Like if you know that your spending is out of control, try to not spend 1 day a week. If you know that you're, having a hard time with managing your finances, just start by getting brave enough to look at your bank account every day. Just start. If you are in the journey, it's going to be exhausting and it's going to feel like you're going to be on this journey forever, but I promise you you're not. I mean, like I said, I thought I would be debt free. Like my original date was like somewhere in 2021, and that date just kept getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And when I looked at it at the beginning of this year, I thought I'd be debt free by December, and I was able to pay off everything by the end of July. So it feels like you're on this journey for a very, very long time, but it isn't forever. It is a temporary thing. And then you start a whole new journey after you become debt free. So if you're in it, know that it's going to feel really not great for most of the time, and then all of a sudden you're done. And you go, "Wait a minute. How did that happen?"
Yeah, it's just a season of life that ends
It
up
is.
passing eventually. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, thank you, Mimi. We won't take too much more of your time, but really briefly, just tell our listeners where they can find you. Give them your Instagram handle and plug anything you want. Plug Compass Rose, whatever
Sure.
you feel.
Yeah, so you can find me and all of my crazy money stuff and vintage style stuff on Meadowsweet Money on Instagram or on Facebook. I also, with my amazing business partner and best friend in the whole wide world, run a company called Compass Rose History Experiences, where we talk about local history. And we have a podcast that you can check out called the Lovably Local Podcast, and listen to some really cool history mysteries. So I'm a little bit all over the place, but the easiest way to find me is on Instagram.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. We appreciate it. You are, like I said, our first, non-pro. I think you're a pro, but we'll call you a non-pro, debt-free human being. So congrats. Thanks for coming on the podcast. And
Thank
we'll
you.
definitely have you on again to chat. We appreciate you.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you,
care.
Mimi.
Bye.
Bye. That's going to do it for this episode of The Price of Avocado Toast. As always, we are so glad to have had this conversation with you, and we're so glad to be part of this awesome community of humans. Happy budgeting.
You've got this, Toasties. Thank you for listening to The Price of Avocado Toast. If you vibed with this episode, share it with a friend. We'd love to continue building our listening community.
If you're interested in speaking more with a financial coach, hit up our coach Ryan at MeFinanciallyFree on Instagram. Use the promo code HELP50 in the consultation notes section to receive 50% off.